I'm talking to Dina Harris Pizer, who grew up in St. John. Actually, you live very near to where we're videotaping now.
Right.
On Leinster Street,
Correct.
I guess. And we're going to be actually talking mostly about your father, because Saul Harris was a survivor of the Holocaust and came to St. John and lived the rest of his life here, mostly.
Mostly, yeah.
So I thought it would be a good place to start if we just talked about your childhood and your parents and things like that, just to kind of get us in the mood for talking, okay?
I grew up on Leinster Street, just a few houses down from where we are now at 105 Leinster Street for most of my life. We did move over to King Street East for a couple of years. The apartment was larger on King Street East, and with my sister and I, we were sharing a room, so Mom and Dad bought or rented an apartment over in King Street East. Too many stairs over there for my mother, so we ended up moving back to Leinster Street, the exact same apartment, the exact same building at 105. So I have one younger sister, Paula Power, and she lives in Milledgeville, and she has one son. She's married with one son, as I am married with one son, Brent. I did all my schooling in St. John. I went to Prince Charles School from grades 1 to 9. I went to St. John High from grades 10 to 12, and then I went on to UNB Fredericton to do 4 years of a physical education degree. Graduated there from 1975. I did my Bachelor of Education at night after I began teaching in 75, and I taught for 32 years. And Mom and Dad they bought the house just after they were married in 49. So I lived all my life, other than a couple of years I mentioned, in King Street East. My sister and I were very happy. Our parents were very good to us. They raised us to be Jewish. I was confirmed by Rabbi Pfeffer way back in 1960, 60-something. Mom and Dad, we led quite a simple life. We attended Hebrew school. We went to Young Judea. We had our Jewish peers, and Dad opened a tailor shop. He began on Prince Edward Street, and then eventually he moved on to Union Street. But before he began his own shop, he worked for Jack Cohn as a tailor. And then I guess he wanted to be an entrepreneur, so he did open his own Harris Menswear. And he worked at his business for over 30 years until Dad retired. And I think it was 1979 that Dad retired. So basically we had a happy childhood. We enjoyed everything. We had lots of friends, and we also had a roof over our head. Dad was a very hard worker. He worked 6 days a week. I think back then stores were just beginning to open on Thursday and Friday nights, and then he worked Saturdays. We observed the Jewish holidays, always went to synagogue, and Mom helped Dad in the store. That was what she did.
When you were a child, I guess did you know that he had gone through the Holocaust and so on?
Not as a young child, but perhaps growing up, as we became more curious, we started to ask Dad about his parents and his sisters and brothers. And I guess as a teenager, we asked, but Dad would never speak of anything. So any bits of information we got, we received from our mother, and she knew very little as well. Dad really never said too much about anything. He just wanted to forget it. And any information I got about the Holocaust, I guess back then, would have been from books that I had read. Information I picked up probably from encyclopedias back then. And the more you asked Dad about anything, the quieter he would become. He was very even-tempered anyway. He was a very silent man. He never spoke much about anything. And he told us absolutely nothing about his life.
Right, but now you know a little bit more about
Right, yeah. Because over the years, Mom, she would ask Dad a little bit more here or there, and then Mom would kind of give us bits of information. And then when we became very curious about it, I guess that's when Mom and Dad moved to Toronto. After Dad retired in 1979, he stayed here until about 86, and then they moved to Toronto, and they were there for like 17 years. So Again, maybe that's the time we probably would have asked him more questions as we grew older, but there was very little known about Dad, his brothers, his sisters, mother, his father. I'm named after his mother and his father's. His mother's name is Dina, as I am. His father's name was Meyer. It was changed for Myra to me, so I'm Dina Mulka. And my sister, Paula, was named after a dad's sister, Pesha, and another sister. Her name is Pesha Dubba.
So do you have somewhere you've written down the names of those family members?
His brothers and his sisters. The only ones we know were who my sister's named after, and another brother that he spoke of, Beryl, who my son Brent is named after, Beryl. Other than that, Mom couldn't even remember like any of the others, and Dad just would not speak of any. So that's it.
Well, I guess now he came from Poland, right?
Correct.
In a town that's hard to pronounce.
That's right.
Based on the spelling.
That's right. A very small town in Poland.
Yes.
It is pronounced. How do we pronounce that one?
Is it Katowice?
Katowice.
Yeah, that's
right.
it. I think Katowice is sort of it's either a town or a county. I'm not sure which.
Okay.
But whatever it is, it's. I think it's west of Krakow, somewhere.
Krakow, yeah.
Somewhere near there, anyway.
Right.
And there were a lot of Jewish people there, I guess.
Right. And Dad, well, he was called Saul, but actually his real name was Solomon Charisky. That's what he was born with, Solomon Charisky. And he's said to have been born, his birth date is May 8th, 1918, but we don't believe that is probably a true account, because after he immigrated to St. John, we later found out that in order for him to find employment, he had made himself younger. So even though he said he was born in 1918, we believe he was probably born about 19, maybe 15. He was probably at least 3 years older than what he said he was. And he changed his name from Charisky to Harris when he immigrated to Canada, because he was told that Charisky would be too hard to pronounce and too difficult to spell. So he ended up changing it to something simple that he thought was close enough to Charisky, which was Harris.
Right.
He's supposed to have had, Dad was supposed to have been the oldest of his brothers, and he had 4 older sisters, and his older sisters apparently were all married, and Dad was the older of all his brothers. Now again, there's a little bit of discrepancy, because we thought that he only had 3 brothers and 4 sisters, but after listening to an interview that was done, I think it was hard to tell, but I think Dad even had a larger family than that. I think it was mentioned that he had even more sisters and brothers than what, and maybe Mom had misunderstood him at the time too. But he did come from a very large family.
Right, and did anybody else in the family survive?
Nobody in his family other than Dad survived the Holocaust. He lost his mother, his father, and all his brothers and sisters.
Right.
And let's see, after the war, well, Dad had been in 3 concentration camps during the war.
Do you want to pause for a minute? Yeah.
So Dad spent the war years in 3 concentration camps. There was Skarczysko, I believe, in one. They were all in Poland. There was Sestacheva, and the last one was Buchenwald, and that's where he was liberated on April 11th, 1945 by the U.S. troops. And so after in 1945, after spending his time there, he made his way into Austria. And I think he was looking for clues as to his members of his family to find out anything, because he had heard from neighbors, from friends, from other people that he doesn't think that they were in Poland, and he started to scout himself around Europe, and he ended up in Austria. And in Austria, he started to sell watches. I believe he was, a very practical man. He was very pragmatic. He knew that would probably get him something. And also while he was in Austria, he took some type of a course to become a tailor because they had told him that apparently they'd be looking for a lot of tailors after the war. So again, he took a course, and then in 1948 he left Austria, and by ship ended up by ship, went to Halifax, ended up in Halifax. He was supposed to have made his way back either to Montreal or Toronto because he knew of the Jewish population being very large in those cities, and that's where he wanted to be. And also he thought that he might have had a brother-in-law that had also ended up in Toronto. One of his sisters who had perished, her husband apparently he thought had made it out. So he thought he would make his way to Toronto to try and seek out this person or find out from somebody. But when he was in Halifax, he had heard about a tailoring job in St. John. So rather than go on to the big city, he ended up coming to St. John in 1948. He boarded with the late Ray Selby. And after that, he ended up moving in with cousins of mine, the late Sadie and Teddy Cohn. And there he had met my mother, because she used to come over there quite a bit anyway. And Sadie and Teddy Cohn had a grocery store on Winter Street at the time, right across from where Winter Street School was. And so Dad was boarding there, and eventually Mom used to come over there. And about 6 months later, after Dad arrived, Mom and Dad were engaged. And I guess it must have been love at first sight. And then they were married on July 5th, 1949. And then in 49, after 49, I think I mentioned before, like Dad, because of the tailoring business, that's what he did. So he ended up working for Jack Cohn for a bit, and then, he had his own shop, Harris Menswear, moving from Prince Edward Street to one side of Union to the other side of Union Street. And that's what he stayed at all his life. So Mom and Dad ran the business together, and Dad would often make many trips to Montreal through the year, like to buy his clothing and things. So when he went, Mom would work there full time for the 3 or 4 days that Dad was gone. He used to go by train all the time. It was like a day there and a day back. Eventually, as time progressed, he ended up taking the plane rather than the train. So the trips became a little shorter for him. So my sister and I kind of helped out in the store a little bit too, like after school. We would just go there and help Mom out and stay there until she went home at supper time. So they both worked very hard, and gave us the best life that we could have.
I guess you have very few pictures of your father.
Yes, very few. From before the war,
yeah.
Because nobody had any cameras and nobody took anything. And when Dad left, the only thing that he brought with him, by the way, was a diamond ring. And that diamond ring was given to Mom as her engagement ring. That was the only thing. And where he had sold watches, he did have a watch in his hand, and he had that watch all his life. Must have been a very good watch, because he had it for, until he passed away.
Gee, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, and even right after the war, I guess there were very few pictures, but I know that you showed me one that was taken maybe in 1946 or so. Or 45 even.
45. This picture was taken
right
at the end of the war.
Right.
And you can see how thin Dad was.
Yeah.
Right at the end of the war.
There's one that it looks like a railway station in Europe somewhere, but I'm not sure. Because
of the sign that was in the background, but somebody must have taken it and he brought it with him when he arrived here.
There's one of, what's that one?
I think this was probably his passport picture that he probably needed to come here. And as I said earlier, his birth date, May 8th, 1918, even the day, May 8th, we don't believe that to be true either, because they never kept records, as of even my mother. Her birthday is September 17th, but she has the same birthday as her late brother, my Uncle Charlie, because they knew they were born around Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, so they gave them the date September 17th, and Dad being born in the spring, they made it May the 8th.
That was also VE Day, I think, Victory in Europe Day.
Yeah.
So maybe he adopted that.
That's right. So they just gave him the birth date as, because they were born according to the seasons in the Jewish calendar, and they didn't keep records back then. So May 8th was the day that was given to Dad.
And then you have a picture of them standing outside the house on Leinster Street.
Yes, this picture was taken just down the street here. I believe it was probably just after they were married, because I believe that's when they bought the house. So this is showing Mom and Dad back then, and yeah, just before probably I came into the world.
Now, you didn't tell me your mother's maiden name.
My mother's maiden name is Zatzman.
Oh, okay. And you mentioned Charlie, so that's
That's
Charlie
right.
Zatzman.
Charlie Zatzman is what was her brother. My
Right.
mother is still living. She's the only, she's the last surviving member of her family, because she lost her older sister Sophie in Toronto 3 years ago. She's lost a younger sister Miriam, who was living in Florida, and her brother Meyer, who was living in Halifax, and her brother Charlie. Dad worked at his business for 30 years. He was a tailor between Prince Edward Street and then Union Street, on two different sides of Union Street. The first side, he was right beside McCaver's Fish Market.
Right.
He was squeezed in between the Ideal Store and McCaver's Fish Market. And then it happened that my cousin, Albert Brim, had a men's clothing store right across the street. And Dad and cousin Albert were always like in friendly rivalry with each other. Like, one would go out of one store and into the other store across the street, and Dad would come out to see him go across the street. And the same with cousin Albert. If somebody left his store, he would come out, and then they'd go into Dad's store, and he would look across the street to see that person go into Dad's store. So anyway, Dad was on one side of Union Street until cousin Albert retired. When he moved to Fredericton, Dad moved across the street because that store was larger, and so Dad took over that store, and that's where he stayed until he retired. In 1979, he sold his business, but he retired from his own business, but he stayed. I guess he still needed something to do, so he worked for Jack's on Charlotte Street, Jack's Menswear.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Jack Levine's.
right. So he worked for Jack Levine, and just doing alterations because he just wanted to keep busy and just something to do, and so he worked there until 1986, I believe. And I guess perhaps it was always gnawing at him that he just wanted to go to a larger community, because when he moved here and took that first tailoring job, when he arrived here in 1948, there were over 250 Jewish families, and back then. And then by the 1960s, as we know, people started moving away, and the community was diminishing, and it became very small. And by 1986, there were hardly any Jewish families left here. And I guess perhaps Dad still wanted to be associated with, more Jewish people. So I guess it was always something that he wanted to do, because he was eventually going to go over to Montreal, Toronto, and then he ended up staying in St. John, meeting my mother and getting married. So in 1986, they eventually did move to Toronto, and Mom's sister, Aunt Sophie, was there, and the Brims were there, and we had some family there. And then he got to know more people, and he liked it. So from 1986, they lived in Toronto until 2003. And 2003, Dad was diagnosed with early on-stage Parkinson's disease, and then eventually he ended up having Alzheimer's. So in 2003, they decided to move back here in 2003. And when they had moved to Toronto in 1986, just at that time, neither my sister nor I were married at that time, and it was just shortly after that they had moved that we both ended up marrying and having children. So my mother then had always wanted to come back. She didn't like being separated from her grandchildren, but Dad was so settled down with the larger Jewish community. So in 2003, after Dad got ill, then they sold their condominium, and they did move back here to St. John in 2003. And Dad, shortly after that, went into nursing care, and Mom moved into the Loch Lomond Villa, into an apartment upstairs. And that's where they ended up. And then Dad was in St. Joseph's. He was in the regional for a time, then moved into St. Joseph's. And even when Dad was in the regional, he had Parkinson's, worse than Alzheimer's for sure. And then when my son Brent was bar mitzvahed in 2004, we tried to convince Dad to come, but Dad was such a proud man, he wouldn't even come to the bar mitzvah because he was shaking so much that he thought people would probably make fun of him. And we tried to talk him out of it, but anyway, we didn't. But after the bar mitzvah, we kind of had a big party at the regional hospital for him. And
What?
okay.
Changing the subject.
Yeah.
I know you. If you didn't feel that way, it wouldn't be right. What did the family do in Poland? What business or trade were they in?
You mean
back when he was a member of this big family in Poland? What did his father do? I mean, was he a farmer or did he have a store?
Oh, we have no idea about anything about any of his family. I just know the only thing that the sisters, it just seemed that his 4 sisters were older than he was, and I believe they were all married, and they had already left the home when war broke out, and Dad was working too, but I'm not even really sure what he was doing for a living back then. He was probably about late 20s or maybe 30 years old probably about his late 20s when war broke out, I think, but he had left to find work on his own, but honestly, Gary, I don't know what he did. I don't even know anything about his parents, even what they did for a living back then.
Well, how did you find out that he? I mean, when he took up tailoring,
right?
He must have had some previous.
Well, he's probably told my mother that fact.
Oh, I see. But you wouldn't.
No, not that I know of. She never
Right.
mentioned anything about what his parents ever did. Because
Right.
I think we asked, like, what did
Right.
they do? But when Dad, when he moved to St. John, and he ended up marrying Mom, he took on my mother's family as his family because he called his in-laws, my mother's parents, he used to call them Mama and Papa, the same as my mother did, Mama and Papa. And Mom's sisters and brothers, took Dad in just like another brother in their family. And they were all very close back then. And Sunday, I guess, was always our family day in our family. We always went to my grandmother's house on Goodrich Street, the whole family.
Yes. I remember that house.
On 1 Goodrich Street, the corner of Goodrich and
Yeah.
Wright. Every Sunday, everybody that was in St. John, we would always gather there. My cousin Sadie and Teddy Cohn and the Brims and our family. And if Aunt Sophie was living in St. John, her family. But Aunt Mary was in Florida by then, and Uncle Meyer was in Halifax. But anybody who was in St. John, it was always a big thing on Sundays. We always spent every Sunday.
Yeah, I remember it as sort of a castle almost.
Yeah.
It had a big stone wall.
That's right.
Yeah.
Around it. But we always spent there, and every Sunday. We always kind of looked forward to it because we got to see all our cousins every Sunday. And
Yeah.
you get to run around and
Did you have a country house?
chaos. Yes, we did.
Where?
We had a country house in Fairvale,
Oh, okay.
which is almost where I live now in Fairvale. Like I live in Rossay, but it's really the old Fairvale.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, when Mom came to St. John, when she was in Toronto, she came down to St. John for a visit once. We went down the Gondola Point Road looking for what we thought might have been where the country house was. We had 2 country houses back to back. My grandparents had one, and we had one who we shared with Mom's brothers and sisters as well. And we think we found out where the house was because she knew it was very close to this grocery store, which still stands down there on the Gondola Point Road. Because it wasn't too far, because they used to walk to Gondola Point Beach.
Garson's, I think, had a place there.
Yeah, there's a lot of Jewish families out there, and they were all just kind of right in a row. But
Yes. Yeah, I have a sort of picture of where they probably were, but they've all been replaced.
that's right, they're permanent housing
Yeah.
now from the cottages.
Yeah.
Either they were torn down and either built up or just renovated into
Yeah.
a full house.
Very interesting. Yeah. Okay. See, I lived near Pandanak, and that's where our summers were.
Oh yeah,
I mean, just a step from Pandanak,
yeah.
and but I don't have much history or knowledge of Fairvale,
Yeah,
so it's interesting.
there were a lot
I
of
have to go into that
That's
at
right.
some point.
Because I can remember just like as a young child, maybe up till about 10 or 12, maybe. I think after that they probably sold it
Yes.
by then.
Yeah. Yeah, because wasn't a
That's
community
right.
anymore.
That's right. And
Same
everybody
thing.
was growing up and going their separate
Yes.
ways by then. And
Yeah. Same thing with all the other families.
that's right.
That comes up in all the conversations I have with people when we're doing these videos. The fact that, they were there, then the community
Yeah.
drifted apart.
That's
Sorry,
right.
the country community.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is. Okay, what do you think I might have forgotten to ask you? What did you expect me to ask you that I didn't?
I'm just trying to think. I think we kind of talked about, everything. The other thing when I think about Dad is when he started to watch movies, like he would go to like movies now and then, but his favorite movie, it's hard to believe, was always Schindler's List.
Really?
Yeah. He used to watch that movie over and over again. He'd go to my sister's house and he'd watch that movie. And to this day, I still have no idea why he would, like that movie used to say, put that movie on, Paul. And Paula would know that it was Schindler's List. And he'd sit there for 3 or 4 hours just watching that movie.
Gosh.
I've never seen it to this day.
Neither have I. I don't really like Holocaust movies.
I couldn't either.
But I know several people I've talked to or otherwise communicated with people who went through similar experiences. I even I'm in contact with a woman who lives in Berlin, of all places. She's Jewish, and her married name is Schindler, but she's not.
Is it?
But she's not related to them, to the Schindler.
Yeah.
But that's also very interesting to me, and to her too, really. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, that was his favorite movie. I'm just trying to think. Dad, he used to like watching wrestling on TV. That was his favorite thing. Watching wrestling. Always liked to hear the news every night. Oh yes, they always played poker. That was the other thing. On Saturdays, after the stores all closed,
Okay.
my cousin's grocery store, Dad's tailor shop, my cousin's Saturday night was always poker night.
And so who would be playing?
At they always played at my grandparents' house on Saturday night.
Mr. Brem?
Yeah.
And your father?
Yeah, and my mother.
Mr. Cohen? No.
Teddy Cohen.
Yes.
Not Sadie, but Teddy. And my aunt Sophie and her husband Nady, Uncle Nady would play there. I said Albert Brim. Mom and Dad both played. Oh, they had quite a poker game there.
What was Nate's last name?
Sandler.
Oh, of course.
Nady Sandler, yeah. So they would play. Like they had a grocery store at the time in Haymarket Square, and so when that closed up, it was just like the thing to do. And they always went there, and they'd play practically all night. Sometimes they'd come home on Saturday night because Sunday was the only day they didn't work, and nobody worked on Sunday. So they'd be playing, till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And the older cousins, like my cousin Stephanie, she used to like babysit us. It was like the older cousins always used to babysit the younger cousins back then. So yeah, so they loved their poker games, and sometimes they'd even play just a little bit on Sunday afternoons after they, wake up or something.
Wow.
That was their thing. But it was all like family. It was always this family that played together, played their poker games.
Must have been funny.
Yeah.
And was that sort of your father's circle of friends too? I mean.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
It was like family. That was really what they had. And even my mother's friends are always within the Jewish community. I mean, when Mom started, way back when they did the first Weight Watchers program, when I forgot the person that started, who was Jewish here, like they all went as a bunch of Jewish ladies. They all used to go to Weight Watchers together.
Nice.
Because back then, of course, the community, as I said, was larger than it was. So.
Yeah, that's right. What about synagogue-related stuff? Do you?
Well, we used to observe the holidays. Of course, all the stores were closed, and people used to say they could always tell. The non-Yiddish people could always tell it was a Jewish holiday in St. John because most of St. John was closed down. Because most of the stores uptown were all Jewish stores, and you could tell that. Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, they'd have the sign in the
That's
window,
right.
closed for the high holidays.
That's right. We'd always been in synagogue. I went to Hebrew school, and we went to Young Judea on Sunday afternoons.
Who were your leaders?
Oh my gosh! You got me there, Gary.
Well, let me think.
I don't remember who my leaders even would have been back then. I just remember learning all the songs. That's where we learned all our songs, all the dances.
Yes.
I don't even remember who my leaders would have been.
Let's see. They would have been my age, I guess. Is that because?
Were you my leader?
No, it would have been a girl, wouldn't it? Or were they mixed?
I can't remember.
When I was at Judeans, there was a boys group and a girls group that I remember anyway.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm not sure though.
Yeah, maybe it was.
Maybe I didn't.
But I remember like Hebrew school. We went to Hebrew school in the building. It was packed. There was classrooms downstairs and upstairs. And
we had. I think there were 4 classes.
Oh, it was big.
When I was there.
Going
But
after school.
I'm just trying to figure out who would have been one of your Judean leaders. What year would it have been? When did you graduate from high school?
I graduated from high school in 1971.
So it would have been 65-ish.
Probably. Yeah, probably in the 60s.
Well, see, I was long gone by then. I was finishing university. So who would it have been? It would have been my brother Jan's group, that age group maybe. Ansel Koshetsky and that age group maybe. I can't think of anybody.
I can't even remember who my leaders were back then.
Well,
I just remember going.
I hope they don't find out from this.
I know. I remember wearing the navy blue skirt and the white blouse.
Oh and the scarf, the scarf, neckerchief.
That's right.
With the little thing on it.
That's right.
I remember those now.
Yeah.
Right.
Every Sunday.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, that was quite a group. I mean, the organization.
That's right.
Okay, let's see, what else? Were you a Girl Guide?
I did brownies for 1 year.
Right, okay.
But no Girl Guides or anything like that.
No, maybe they didn't exist anymore.
No, I don't think they did. But I was, I was always involved in sports from whenever sports began in school. And
for St. John High, what did you do?
Yeah, even in Prince Charles. Oh, I played everything. I did everything, basketball and volleyball and softball and badminton and whatever they had.
Okay, let me think if there's something that we're going to regret if we didn't put it in. I'll reach over and pick up that picture of your father, the color picture.
Oh, yes.
And
this picture was taken in Toronto after they moved to Toronto in 86. They moved to Toronto. This was taken at my cousin Bobby Brim, his oldest daughter, bat mitzvah, and Mom and Dad went to this bat mitzvah, and as you can see, Dad was having a great time there, and he enjoyed it. As long as he was around Jewish people, he always seemed to enjoy himself. Oh, I know something. Dad spoke 5 languages because when he had a store, when the sailors used to come in off the boats, especially the Russian sailors, they always used to go up to Dad's store to buy a lot of their clothing because Dad could speak Russian. He spoke Polish and Yiddish and English and what other languages? Polish and Russian, Yiddish, English, probably some other European country, other languages that he spoke. But yeah, he was a very gentle man, a true gentleman. As you can see in this picture, his clothing, it was always shirt and tie, always a suit jacket and pants. He very rarely went without a tie until after he retired, and then he'd still wear the suit, but he just omitted the tie from then. But he knew cloth. He always liked to feel cloth, and he could always tell. He could come in here and feel your pants, touch your pants, and knew right away practically where you bought your pants. He could tell if they were bought at Walmart or Woolco or if they were bought at Tip Top Tailors. He could just tell by the feel of cloth and things.
Yeah, that's good.
For sure.
Yes, right.
Yeah. But, during the years, I can remember growing up at nighttime because Dad always went to bed early. He was always so tired. He had, always had flashbacks. He was always yelling and screaming in his sleep. Maybe there were night terrors and things. He would always be yelling and screaming and yelling out the names of people. And sometimes it was probably his brothers and his sisters that he'd be yelling out. And he'd yell out the name of Hitler and things. Of course, when he woke up the next morning, if he tried to ask him about it, he wouldn't even remember what had happened. He never remembered any of these flashbacks at all. But even if you asked him a question, he would always say, no, 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 anything like that.
The only interview you know of that he ever did was that CPC.
Correct.
That was around the time of, I guess, the Zundel Holocaust denial trial.
Right.
And the museum has a copy of it, and in that he gets extremely emotional.
Right.
And
Because he said, how could people deny that when
yeah,
after he
exactly.
had gone through it, and I'm
Yeah.
living proof that it existed.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it's good that he said it and that we have it, and so hopefully we'll be able to get permission to use parts of the interview in this video. Which
Yeah. This is here's one more picture. This is a picture. This is Mom and Dad on their wedding day. They were married at the Admiral Beatty Hotel. They had a huge wedding. I remember in the Georgian ballroom.
right.
Made it on the long weekend in July, so people from the States could come up from the July 4th weekend and have that. And I think they were married for 58 years before Dad passed away in February 12th, 2008. So yeah, big wedding and nice wedding dress and all that. I guess that was my mother's dream wedding.
All right. Well, I think we've done quite a bit, but I think it's great that you did this. So, and I guess I'm on record as saying it. So,
Yeah.
so thank you very
It
much.
was good to have told Dad's story.
Thank you.
You're welcome.